Hello, and welcome back to Mammalian Anatomy at Keuka College. In this video, we're going to be continuing our lecture series on the digestive system, and specifically, we're going to be starting to look at the organs that compose the digestive system. I did want to remind you that the digestive system has two categories of classification for the organs. There are organs that make up the GI tract. These organs are going to actually create the tube in which food will travel through, and so it will start at the mouth and end at the anus. And then the other classification would be accessory organs. These accessory organs doesn't create the tube that food travels through, rather they will be attached to that tube. All right. So here in this video, let's look at the mouth and its accessory organs. So the mouth is going to have a lot of different functions. Its primary function is going to be ingestion, so putting food into the digestive tract. But once it's there, there's going to be a lot of sensory analysis of that food. So there are many different types of receptors that are going to be located in the mouth. Some of them are going to detect temperature, so we can tell if the food is hot or cold. They're going to detect texture and also taste. So we learned in our video on the sensory organs that the tongue is going to be the primary organ responsible for taste, but there are different regions of the mouth that also contain taste buds. The mouth also is going to play an important role in mechanical processing. So I did want to clarify the difference between mechanical processing and digestion. Mechanical processing is going to be a process in which we use physical mechanisms to break down food, while digestion is going to be a chemical process that will rely on enzymes to break chemical bonds. So mechanical is going to be a physical process, while digestion is going to be a chemical process. So how do we how do we mechanically process food? We're going to mechanically process food primarily using the teeth, which are going to cut, tear, and crush the food that enters our mouth. We can also use the tongue and other surfaces of the mouth to crush the food as well. The mouth is also going to be responsible for lubrication of the food. So the mouth has an accessory organ called the salivary gland, and the salivary glands are going to produce saliva. This saliva is primarily going to be composed of water, but it also will produce mucus that will moisten the food and make it easier to swallow and prevent the food from damaging the pharynx and the esophagus as it's traveling to the stomach. Lastly, the mouth is going to start digestion. So the chemical breakdown of food is actually going to start in the mouth. And it's going to primarily focus on the digestion of carbohydrates and lipids. So carbohydrates would be things such as sugars and starch, and lipids would be different types of fats and oils that would be found in the food. And to do this, we're going to be using two enzymes, salivary amylase, which is produced by the salivary glands, and this is going to be responsible for breaking down carbohydrates. And the lingual lipase. The lingual lipase is going to be responsible for breaking down fats and oils. So those are going to be the functions of the mouth. We've already alluded to the fact that the mouth has accessory organs. These accessory organs would include the teeth, the tongue, and the salivary glands. So let's go into the structure of each of these and look at their functions. So the first accessory organ we're going to talk about is the teeth. The teeth is primarily responsible for mastication. Mastication is a physiological term used for chewing, and so it's going to help with that mechanical breakdown, that mechanical processing. The teeth are going to be responsible for cutting, tearing, and crushing food, depending on their shape. And it also helps saturate the food with enzymes. So what happens is when we chew food, it will actually break the food into smaller pieces, and as a result, increase its surface area. Because of this increase in surface area, the digestive enzymes have more to work with and will be able to digest the food a lot better. So that is why we're going to chew our food. Now let's kind of look at the structure of a tooth. Here we're actually taking a tooth and we're cutting it in cross-section. And we can see that the tooth is going to have 3 regions. So here is my cursor. The top part is known as the crown. The crown is going to be what is exposed and what we generally see when we look at the teeth. We then have the neck. The neck is going to be the region of the tooth that is going to be connected or embedded in the gums, or what we call the gingiva in anatomy. And then we have the root. The root is a part of the tooth that is embedded in the bones, the bone of the mandible or the maxillae, depending on if we're looking at the top teeth or the bottom teeth. And the teeth are going to be connected to the bone using a periodontal ligaments. Over here, represented by these blue stripes. And so this is what's going to hold the tooth into the bone. And this would be an example of a symphysis joint. Okay. In addition to having 3 regions, we're going to have different layers of bone. The outermost part of bone over here in the crown is going to be the enamel. It's going to be a tough exterior that is going to help with the chewing. We also have a layer that coats the outside of the teeth within the root. We call it this cementum over here. And then the deeper layer is going to be the dentin. This is going to be much softer than the enamel. And the dentin is actually going to have tubes that are going to carry nutrients and materials from the pulp to the enamel. This deepest region is called the pulp cavity, and the pulp cavity is going to contain the blood vessels that feed and nourish the tooth, and it also is going to have sensory neurons located there. We have different types of teeth based on their shape, and their shape is going to be really important because it's going to determine the function of the tooth. And we can actually use teeth to study the different types of diets that other mammals would have. So let's talk about the teeth, and let's talk then about how the teeth may vary from organism to organism depending on its diet. The first type of teeth are going to be called the incisors. These are going to be blade-like structures, and their major job is for clipping or cutting food. So imagine you're eating a sandwich or something, and you want to take a nice bite off of it. You're going to use your incisors to kind of cut the food, almost like scissors cutting the food, so that you can take a nice bite of that. Or imagine you're biting into an apple. You're going to use your incisors to cut into that apple. The next type of tooth is going to be the cuspids. The cuspids also can be called the canines, And these cuspids are going to get its name because they're going to have a point to them. Cuspid refers to point. And in humans, they'll be more conical. And the function of the cuspids are to tear or slash food. So say, for example, you're eating like a piece of like beef jerky or something, and it's really, really hard. You're going to use your cuspids to kind of pull off a piece, right? Humans, because we cook our food, our cuspids don't have to be as sharp as other organisms, because the cooking process actually decreases the toughness of the meat or the food. So we have evolved to have much smaller cuspids as a result of that. Other organisms, especially organisms that are carnivores and they rely on eating fresh meat, will have much longer and pointier cuspids. So if you look at the teeth of a cat, a dog, a wolf, or something like that, you'll notice that their cuspids are going to be much pointier as a result of that. Further back, we're going to have the bicuspids, and the bicuspids get its name because it has 2 points, bi meaning 2, cusp meaning point, and these are going to just be kind of flattened ridges that are going to crush, mash, and grind food. So they're going to kind of help the molars do their job. The molars are the most posterior teeth that we have, and and their job is primarily to crush and grind food. Some individuals are going to be able to have their wisdom teeth or their third set of molars actually grow in, but other people are not. As humans have evolved from our ancient species, our jaws have gotten much, much smaller compared to Australopithecus or things like that. And so we actually don't, for the most part, don't have enough space in our jaws to be able to have these third set of molars that would typically form between ages of 17 and 21. So this is why many people have to get their wisdom teeth pulled out so that their teeth are not crowded and they don't experience pain as they are coming in. So that would be for humans. If we compare our teeth to other organisms, there are going to be structural differences. Also, the different types of teeth that are present will differ. So if you compare our teeth to, for example, herbivores such as deer, deer are definitely going to have incisors, and they will have bicuspids and molars, but they are not going to necessarily have cuspids. There'll be actually a little gap in between where those teeth are supposed to be. That makes sense for their diet. Deer are going to have incisors because they're going to have to clip the grass or other vegetation that they eat to be able to cut it and to actually take a bite of that food. And then they're going to have to grind that plant material down using their molars. So they're not going to have a region where they have teeth. I can actually show you, I have a bison jaw in my office. And so later on, I can show you how the bison's teeth actually differ, and you can see how the bison's teeth are associated with its function. When we get back in the semester, I can show you guys the different skulls in my collection, and we can compare and contrast the different teeth shapes that the organisms have and try to associate it with the diet that these organisms eat. So we'll see that the bison is going to be very different than the weasel and the fox. So they'll all have kind of different diets and will have different teeth as a result of that. right, moving on. The next accessory organ is going to be the tongue. And again, it's going to do a lot of the same functions that the mouth is going to do, because it's going to be a major role in how the mouth functions. It's going to do that mechanical processing of food. It's going to manipulate the food around. So it's going to help move the food from side to side as we chew and be able to kind of direct the food to where it needs to go. It also will help with the voluntary phases of swallowing. So it actually will push against the surface of the hard palate and push the food backwards into the pharynx as we are swallowing. Obviously, it's going to be involved in sensory analysis. The tongue is one of the most sensitive regions of the body. It has such a large portion of it, a portion of the brain dedicated to it. And so it's going to feel the texture of food, and it's also going to help process the taste of food. And lastly, it's going to secrete mucins and lingual lipase. So it will lubricate the food and it will start the digestion of food. The next accessory structure for the oral cavity or the mouth is going to be the salivary glands. And so this is going to secrete saliva into the oral cavity, and saliva is going to contain a number of different components. Primarily, it's going to be composed of water, so that's why it has the texture that it does. But it also is going to contain mucus, and that mucus is going to aid in the lubrication of the food, and it's going to make it a little bit slick. So as it's going into our pharynx and esophagus, it won't damage the pharynx and esophagus, as those regions will experience some friction. Next, it's going to contain buffers. Buffers are chemical pairs that are going to be an important role in regulating pH. And we'll see that different regions of the digestive system are going to have tightly controlled values for pH so that the region can function the way that it needs to do. And buffers are going to play a role in regulating and changing that pH depending on which organ we are in. So in the mouth, the buffers are going to neutralize the pH. And so it's going to make sure that the mouth doesn't get damaged by anything too acidic or too basic that we eat. So it's going to kind of help neutralize that. It's going to have digestive enzymes such as salivary amylase. This is going to be an enzyme that the salivary glands are going to produce, and this is going to help us digest carbohydrates. And lastly, we're going to have a lysozyme. This is a protein that acts as an antibiotic, and it will limit the amount of bacterial growth in the mouth. So it'll help with immunity and will balance the amount of bacteria that is located in the mouth. So those are our salivary glands. We're going to have three groups of salivary glands, and they are going to include the parotid, the sublingual, and the submandibular glands. Over here we can see the parotid gland. The parotid gland is going to be near the ear, and it's going to be sitting on top of and a little bit posterior to the masseter muscle. The sublingual is going to be directly below the tongue. And then over here we have the submandibular, which is going to be a little bit inferior and medial to the mandible. So that concludes our discussion of the mouth and its accessory structures. And in the next video, we're going to look at the pharynx and esophagus. I'll see you next time, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.